At 94 years old, Clint Eastwood finally said something that stunned even those who thought they knew him best. Not about another movie, not about awards, not about regrets, but about who he does not want anywhere near his funeral. And when you hear the names tied to that decision, the shock only grows deeper, because this wasn't bitterness, it wasn't revenge, it was something far colder. It was a man at the very end of the road drawing his final, unmovable line. To understand why Clint Eastwood would make a choice like that, you have to go all the way back before the fame, before the guns, the badges, the Oscars, back to a boy shaped by instability, silence, and survival. Because the values that built Clint Eastwood are the same values that now decide who is not welcome at his final goodbye. And once those values are crossed, there is no forgiveness. Not in life, not in death. Long before the legend existed, before the stair, the badge, the gun, there was just a boy named Clinton Eastwood Jr., born in 1930 in the shadow of the Great Depression. His early life was anything but stable. His family moved constantly, chasing survival wherever his father could find steelwork. New towns, new schools, new faces, no roots. That kind of childhood doesn't teach comfort. It teaches self-reliance. While other kids learned how to belong, Eastwood learned how to stand alone. He watched adults struggle, watched promises collapse, and learned early that nothing was guaranteed. That silence people later mistook for arrogance was actually a discipline carved into him young. There was no safety net, no shortcuts, no excuses. By the time he finished high school in Oakland, he wasn't chasing dreams. He was chasing a stability. He worked whatever job kept him moving forward. Lumberjack, lifeguard, gas station attendant. Work that didn't reward talk, only effort. Then came the U.S. Army during the Korean War era. The military didn't soften him, it sharpened him. Routine, pressure, responsibility, consequences. While stationed at Fort Ord, something shifted. For the first time, he found himself surrounded by others quietly chasing the same impossible goal. Hollywood, not fame yet, just opportunity. But when he stepped into acting in the 1950s, there was no instant breakthrough, just small roles, forgettable parts, films that barely noticed him. Most people would have quit. He didn't, because quitting had never been an option in his life. That patience finally paid off when he landed a role on the television western Rawhide. He wasn't supposed to stand out. He wasn't the star, but something about his stillness, his quiet confidence, changed everything. He didn't need speeches. He didn't need charm. He let silence do the work, and audiences felt it immediately. That was the moment Clint Eastwood realized something important. You don't have to explain yourself to be powerful. That belief would shape every choice he made next, on screen, behind the camera, and eventually in the most personal decision of all, who deserved to stand at his final farewell. By the time Rawhide made him recognizable, Clint Eastwood had something most actors never find, a presence that didn't beg for attention. It demanded it. But television fame was only the doorway. The real transformation came when Eastwood stepped into a world that would remake him into an international icon. In the 1960s, he became the face of Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy. And this wasn't the clean, heroic cowboy America grew up worshiping. This was something darker, sharper, a morally gray anti-hero with a stare that felt like a threat and a promise at the same time. Eastwood's character didn't preach about justice, he delivered it cold. Those films didn't just elevate him, they redefined the Western genre, Suddenly, cowboys weren't flawless symbols anymore. They were complicated, dangerous, real, and that shift didn't sit well with everyone. Because Eastwood wasn't just becoming famous, he was challenging the old rules. Then, in the 1970s, he cemented himself as a symbol of American grit when he became Dirty Harry Callahan, the tough, no-nonsense San Francisco cop who didn't play by polite rules and didn't apologize for being blunt. Dirty Harry hit at the exact right moment. The country was tense, rising crime, distrust in institutions. People felt trapped under red tape, fed up with weak promises, and Eastwood's character spoke to that frustration like a punch to the chest. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He didn't beg for approval. He acted, and audiences loved him for it. But while fans were cheering, Clint Eastwood was already thinking beyond the spotlight. He didn't want to remain only the man in front of the camera. He wanted control. Control of the story, control of the tone, control of the legacy. So in 1971, he stepped into directing with Play Misty for Me, a psychological thriller that shocked people who thought he was just a tough guy actor. It revealed something powerful. Eastwood wasn't guessing. He understood tension, timing, pressure, emotion. His directing style became a mirror of who he was as a man. Lean, focused, no nonsense, no bloated budgets, no chaos, just clean storytelling that hit hard. And that discipline earned him respect, not just from audiences, but from Hollywood insiders who realized he wasn't going anywhere. Because Clint Eastwood wasn't building a career, he was building a fortress. And when a man builds his life like a fortress, he starts deciding very carefully who is allowed inside. By the time the 1990s arrived, Clint Eastwood was no longer chasing respect. He owned it. Decades of discipline had finally paid off in a way that silenced every remaining doubt. In 1992, he released Unforgiven, a film that didn't just win awards, but rewrote how Hollywood saw him. This wasn't the fearless gunslinger anymore. This was an aging man haunted by violence, regret, and consequence. And that was the shock. Eastwood had helped build the myth of the Western hero. Then he tore it down himself. Unforgiven won him Academy Awards for Best Director and Best Picture, confirming what insiders already knew. Clint Eastwood wasn't just an icon. He was a serious filmmaker with something to say. And he kept going. Films like $1 Million Baby, Gran Torino, American Sniper, and Letters from Iwo Jima proved he wasn't interested in comfort. He explored identity, redemption, aging, and the moral weight of choices. What set him apart wasn't just talent, it was control. Eastwood worked fast. He ran tight sets. He hated waste. He demanded professionalism without shouting. Actors trusted him. Crews respected him. Studios learned not to interfere. But that same control that made him unstoppable in Hollywood created distance in his personal life. In 1953, long before the fame, he married Maggie Johnson. She stood beside him through Rawhide, through international fame, through the chaos of sudden power. Together, they had 2 children. From the outside, it looked solid. Inside, the cracks were forming. Long absences, emotional distance, affairs whispered about, but rarely addressed. Fame didn't break the marriage overnight. It wore it down slowly. When they divorced in 1984, the settlement reportedly reached tens of millions of dollars, a public reminder of just how powerful Eastwood had become. It was quiet, but it wasn't painless. Years later, he married again. This time to Dina Ruiz, a television journalist decades younger, whom he met after Unforgiven changed his life forever. They had a daughter, Morgan, and for a while, stability seemed possible again. But control doesn't always mix with closeness. By 2014, that marriage ended too. Behind the legendary career stood a man whose relationships often struggled under the same rules that made him great: independence, distance, emotional restraint. And as his family tree grew larger and more complicated, Eastwood became even more private. He spoke less, explained nothing, protected his boundaries fiercely, because by this point in his life, he had learned something hard. Not everyone deserves access. Not everyone earns loyalty. And not every chapter needs closure. Those beliefs would later resurface in the most unexpected way when Eastwood quietly made it clear that some names, no matter how famous, were not welcome at his final goodbye. At 94, Clint Eastwood stopped looking forward. He started looking back. And in a rare, blunt moment, he reportedly made it clear that when his final day comes, not everyone gets to stand beside his name. This wasn't about drama, it wasn't about publicity, it was about principle. Behind closed doors, Eastwood was said to have drawn a line, a quiet but firm list of people he did not want honoring him at his funeral. And when those names surfaced, they stunned Hollywood, because they weren't random. They were powerful, influential, iconic. At the top of the list was John Wayne, two titans of American cinema, two men forever linked to the Western genre, but behind the scenes, their relationship was cold. Wayne despised Eastwood's morally gray cowboys, especially films like High Plains Drifter, which he believed destroyed the heroic image of the American cowboy. When Eastwood once sent Wayne a script hoping to collaborate, Wayne rejected it harshly, calling it perverse and un-American. Eastwood respected Wayne's legacy, but felt he was trapped in the past. Different values, different eras, no reconciliation. Then came Leonardo DiCaprio. Despite working together, Eastwood reportedly found DiCaprio's high-profile political activism exhausting. To Eastwood, loud speeches, private jets, and elite conferences felt performative, not principled. He valued quiet discipline, not public signaling. Another surprise name was Tom Hanks. America's favorite nice guy didn't align with Eastwood's world. Their collaboration on Sully revealed deep differences. Eastwood ran fast, efficient sets with minimal emotion. Hanks was expressive, methodical, and openly political. Respect existed, but harmony did not. Then there was Spike Lee. Their feud went public in 2008 after Lee criticized Eastwood's World War II films. Eastwood fired back, defending historical accuracy and condemning what he saw as unnecessary provocation. To him, Lee represented noise, division, and public grandstanding. Everything he despised. Add Michael Moore, whose confrontational activism clashed violently with Eastwood's respect for soldiers, personal responsibility, and restraint. The tension between them was never subtle. And finally, the most personal name of all, Sandra Locke, a former partner, a long, turbulent relationship, years of legal battles, emotional wounds that never healed. Though Locke passed away in 2018, Eastwood reportedly made it clear he wanted no ghosts, literal or symbolic, reopening scars at his final farewell. At this stage of his life, Eastwood wasn't interested in peacekeeping. No politics, no speeches, no unresolved wars, just boundaries. Because to Clint Eastwood, respect wasn't something you declared, it was something you earned. If you're trying to understand why Clint Eastwood would draw a funeral line this hard, this late in life, you have to understand one thing about him. He didn't just act tough, he lived disciplined. For Eastwood, self-control wasn't a phase or a Hollywood habit. It was a lifetime code. Even as a teenager, long before wellness became trendy, he stayed locked in. While many men of his era partied hard and burned fast, Eastwood moved differently, quiet, consistent, strict. During his early fame on Rawhide, he stood out, not just for his presence on a screen, but for how he carried himself off it. He trained. He stayed in shape. He didn't live like a man who believed tomorrow was guaranteed. And there was a reason for that. In 1959, he even appeared doing push-ups in TV Guide, not as some flashy stunt, but as proof of routine. No glamour, just discipline. And with that, he shared fitness advice that sounded exactly like him. Natural, balanced eating, fresh fruit, raw vegetables, clean fuel. He supported daily vitamins, warned against heavy sugar and sodas, and pushed moderation like it was law. He cautioned against loading up on carbs. He discouraged heavy drinking, function over excess. That wasn't just health talk. That was how he saw life. Then in 1970, something happened that hit him harder than anything Hollywood ever could. His father died suddenly of a heart attack at only 64. And the shock wasn't just grief, it was fear. It forced Clint Eastwood to face time in the harshest way possible, especially because his grandfather had lived into his 90s, and that contrast messed with him. Genetics, fate, choices, suddenly it wasn't abstract, it was personal. From that moment, his discipline wasn't optional anymore. It became urgent. That urgency didn't only shape his health, it shaped his career pace too. He attacked projects with focus, wrapped shoots fast, kept budgets lean, refused waste, refused chaos. The same routine that kept him as strong physically became the routine that made him unstoppable professionally. And here's the part people don't expect. Even though Eastwood wasn't a heavy drinker and never lived that hard party lifestyle, he still understood something most celebrities miss. People need community. That's why in 1971, he co-founded the Hog's Breath Inn in Carmel by the Sea. Rustic, warm, comfortable, not flashy, not fake. A place locals could claim and tourists could love. It proved something about him. He didn't need to indulge to understand people, but he did need control. Because control was his shield. Control was his identity. Control was what kept him safe from the instability he grew up with. And once you understand that, the funeral list starts making a brutal kind of sense. If Eastwood believes someone lives in contradiction, performs for attention, or turns life into noise, he doesn't forgive that. He cuts it off. Not loudly, not emotionally, just firmly. And at 94, he's not bending for anyone, not even for the sake of peace at the end. When you pull everything together, the childhood, the discipline, the control, the conflicts, the so-called funeral blacklist, stops sounding like controversy. It starts sounding like consistency. For more than 7 decades, Clint Eastwood lived by the same rules. Work quietly. Speak only when necessary. Respect earned, never demanded. Boundaries enforced, not negotiated. Hollywood changed around him, louder, faster, more performative. He didn't follow. He never chased approval. He never reshaped himself to stay liked. And he never apologized for drawing lines other people were afraid to draw. That's why his final wishes shocked so many people. Not because they were cruel, but because they were honest. No political theater, no unresolved grudges dressed up as tribute. No faces he felt didn't belong. To Eastwood, a funeral wasn't a stage. It was a closing statement. And like every film he directed, every set he ran, every routine he followed, he wanted it clean, quiet, and controlled. That final goodbye won't just honor a legendary career, it will reflect the man exactly as he lived, independent, unapologetic, unmoved. And in a town built on noise, Clint Eastwood's last act may be the most powerful one of all: silence.